Welcome back to Tethered and Whole, folks. I'm your host, Matt Weld, and today we're going to talk about emotions. Not the fluffy motivational poster version, but the science backed, classroom relevant kind of emotions that impact us as teachers every single day. And I want to start out with an idea from neuroscientist Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett. She wrote a book called How Emotions Are Made: The Secret Life of the Brain. And now I'll warn you, this is a dense read, but it's one of those books I find myself returning to over and over because it reframes how I think about myself and my work as an educator. Here's the big idea. Your brain is locked away in a dark, silent space inside your skull, yet somehow it reveals to you a world that's full of light and sound, color, and meaning. How does it do that? It predicts constantly. Your brain takes information from outside your body, what you see, hear, and feel, and it combines it with information from inside your body, your heart rate, your energy levels, your hunger cues. But instead of processing every little detail in real time, which would use way too much energy, it predicts what's about to happen based on your past experiences. And then incoming information simply tweaks those predictions. In other words, you don't really think about most of what you do. You're running on predictions, habits, autopilot, all formed out of past experiences. Now, here's where knowing about emotions gets important for teachers. When you feel stressed, your brain has predicted that you're about to need a big metabolic outlay. That is, you're going to need a lot of energy to deal with something. But if your body's energy budget, the amount of energy that your body knows that it has, if it's low, maybe you didn't sleep well, maybe you skipped lunch, maybe you're running on too much coffee and not enough exercise, your brain has less fuel to regulate your body. And you then experience that as fatigue, as irritability, or distress. So, when we feel a negative emotion, it's not really anyone's fault. It comes down to our body's energy budget and the brain's prediction system. This is why some days you're on edge and other days you're fine. Why some days a student really got under your skin, but it wasn't that way 2 days ago. Psychologist Susan David adds another layer here with her concept of emotional agility. She argues that resilience isn't about ignoring or suppressing emotions, but rather about, catch this, radical acceptance. Radical acceptance is letting emotions be what they are and seeing them as data. Every emotion points us towards something we value, which is why we shouldn't be telling kids that whatever they are feeling is bad. It may be that they aren't expressing their emotions properly, but what they are feeling cannot be helped. How they express it can. A teacher once told me that he could be called the F word by a student and brush it off. No big deal. But when a kid called him dude, he lost it. Why? On the surface, dude seems harmless, but it must have brushed up something against his core identity, something deeply embedded in his personal history. I can relate. In my own seventh grade classroom, you could disrespect me directly, and I'd usually handle it calmly. But if I saw students disrespecting each other, especially bullying during class presentations, it lit me up inside. I still remember pulling a student out in the hall after he made some snide remarks while another kid was presenting. I yelled. My head spun around, and I became the teacher I never wanted to be. And the kid looked at me with both shock and pity. Not a good day in my life. And looking back, I realized that that moment tapped into my own seventh grade self, the bullied version of me, and that wound was and still is part of my identity. So now, if you put Barrett's and David's work together, it makes sense. Our brains run predictions based on past experiences. When incoming data doesn't fit the pattern, especially if it collides with something central to our identity, our systems flood with energy demands. The prefrontal cortex, the so-called big guy in charge of reasoning, has to step in and say, whoa, everybody, take a breath. And that's not always easy in the moment. All right, so what do we do with this knowledge? Let me give you a strategy to try this week. All right, so the next time you feel yourself getting worked up, maybe a student says something that pushes your buttons, or a colleague makes a comment that stings, pause and turn to curiosity. Ask yourself, what might this emotion be pointing to? What past experience or value is this brushing up against? Because here's the thing. It's nearly impossible to feel both anger and curiosity at the same time. Curiosity shifts your brain's prediction system. It moves you from fight or flight into learning mode. So here's your challenge. This week, when you feel some kind of way about what someone says or does, take a breath and turn toward curiosity. Notice what value or memory might be underneath the surface. Even jot it down so that later you can think about it in stillness or journal about it to give your mind and body a chance to process the experience. Because, friends, at the end of the day, teaching is full of emotional moments, some uplifting, some draining. But the more fluent we become in reading our emotions as data, the more intentional we can be about our responses. And that, my friends, is what tethering ourselves and our students to wholeness is all about. We'll talk more about emotional literacy in a future episode. Until then, thanks for listening to Tethered and Whole. If today's episode resonated, please consider sharing it with a fellow educator who could use a little science-backed perspective on emotions. And remember, emotions aren't obstacles. They're signposts. Let's learn to read them well. And I'll see you next week.